So without further ado, I present to you Tizziana, who's going to fearlessly lead the conversation. And thank you everyone very much for coming here today.
I think I'm there. Thank you. That was very, very sweet, and I'm very grateful for that introduction. I'm going to introduce Fred and Michael, who are seated to my left, for everyone who's not in your business. So Fred Bidwell is the Executive Director of Front International, as well as a philanthropist, collector, and community leader. After a 35-year career as an advertising and marketing entrepreneur, in 2011, he and his wife established the Fred and Laura Ruth Bidwell Foundation. In 2013, the Bidwell Foundation opened Transformer Station, a contemporary art exhibition space on Cleveland's west side. Transformer Station alternates between acting as a venue for exhibitions curated by the Bidwells from their renowned collection of photo-based contemporary art, and as a venue for exhibitions organized by the Cleveland Museum of Art. Fred Bidwell served twice as board president of the Akron Art Museum and is currently on the board of the Cleveland Museum of Art, on the visiting committee of the Allen Memorial Art Museum, and chairs the board of the Assembly for the Arts. And to Fred's left is Michael. Michael Gill is the founding executive director for Collective Arts Network, the nonprofit organization that produces Can Triennial and publishes Can Journal, its website, blog, and newsletter. This role draws on the diverse skills of the varied liberal arts informed career. Prior to Ken, he served as arts editor at both the Cleveland Free Times and the Cleveland Scene. And prior to that, he was the marketing director at Beck Center for the Arts. Michael has won multiple awards for his arts feature writing in the Press Club of Cleveland's Statewide Excellence in Journalism Awards, including Best in Ohio in the Review's Criticism category in 2022. In 2019, the same organization named Can Journal the best magazine in Ohio, which is a tribute to designer Joanne Dickey and the multitude of artists, writers, and organizations that contribute to the magazine. He has a BA in English from Hiram College and an MFA in creative writing from Eastern Washington University. So please join me in welcoming Fred and Michael. Great. So I think what we're going to first start off with is both of them will present brief presentations on their respective triennial projects. And then we will move on to a moderated discussion, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A afterwards. And I thank you all for being here and for being gracious and attentive listeners. So thank you all. Michael, I think you're on first.
All righty. So I'm going to test the clicker and look at that. So it just struck me that it's humorous that I'm going first, because in fact what came first was the idea for the front triennial, and in a very real way, Ken was inspired by that to follow the lead, to take advantage, to co-opt, to add to the energy. Any way you describe that. So I want to tell you a little bit about that, but to go back a little bit first. So the first Can Triennial, like the first front triennial, happened in 2018. The first of these was at 78th Street Studios for Can. It ran for 3 weeks only. There were 90 artists presented. We estimate that the attendance was about 7,550 people. And we offered exhibition prizes with regional museums, which I'm sure I'll talk more about, and purchase prizes. There was an art fair with 16 dealers, mostly from Northeast Ohio, but also from Columbus and Cincinnati. And really, this was born of the idea of synergy. As I said, Can evolved from organizations interested in working together to bolster the regional arts scene. So in 2011, my friend Liz, who is here, organized this series of conversations among art organizations, which led to the creation of this group effort to create the magazine. And a few years later, the same kind of idea led to the creation of Triennial. So fast forward through the pandemic to 2022, and we've grown just massively. Instead of one venue, we're in 16 venues in 6 neighborhoods. Instead of having the whole thing curated by a team of 4, we have each neighborhood curated by one of 5 curators. And as Megan told you, one of those curators is a group of students from the Cleveland Museum of Art's currently under curation program, curating this neighborhood. Also Kristen Rogers, Michael Gutierrez, Darius Stewart, and help me. Taya Spittle, thank you. Is our curatorial team. So in multiple neighborhoods, and we've also stretched out the length of the exhibition to 2 months, which has been great because it gives us some breathing room. So our venues, like a lot of the Cleveland regional art scene, their facilities reused. Last year, or the last triennial, we were in 78th Street Studios, which used to be the American Creative Studios. This year, in addition to that, we are at 78th Street Studios. This is the Gold Building, which was slated for demolition before a developer and a group of arts-related businesses determined that that would be a huge loss if this building at the corner of Waterloo and 156 were demolished. So we have exhibitions there. This is Praxis, former storefront down the street. This is the home of Zygote Press on East 30th Street. All these are reused industrial facilities. This is the Hildebrand Provisions Company, which is a former sausage factory in the Clark Fulton neighborhood. This is the Pivot Center, a former awning factory down the street in the Clark Fulton neighborhood. This is the Morgan Conservatory, which had various industries inside before it became nationally significant hand paper making, traditional paper making facility with a garden out back where they actually grow pulp. So the Morgan was the site of our opening party, which was a great time. And I'm just going to quickly move through some scenes of that before handing the clicker to Fred so that he can introduce you to front. Before I go on to show you party pictures, I should join Meg in thanking our funders. We simply wouldn't be here without a whole lot of people's support, including the Cleveland and the Gunn Foundations and the Ohio Arts Council and the Cuyahoga Arts and Culture and many others, but I just want to make sure I acknowledge those. So we had a great opening night party a couple of weeks ago. This is the inside of the Morgan. This is, people browsing the art next to the letterpress studio. There's our friend Frank Bidwell, look at that, doing what we all do. The selfie pose. This is Jeremy Johnson with an up-and-coming artist, Krista Freehand, who I first saw at the gallery Deep Roots Experience, which is emblematic of something magnificent going on in town. A new gallery focused on Black and brown artists at East 79th and Central. There was nothing like that in the neighborhood before David Ramsey opened Deep Roots. And Krista has been exhibiting there. I saw her work first several years ago and was so happy. You may or may not know, I stay completely out of curation in the Triennial, and I was so happy to see Krista's work appear. And at our opening night party, we had the world's greatest pedicab. This gentleman named Malcolm just appeared. This is how he arrived actually on this bicycle with a shopping cart and giving people rides. It's very comfortable, as you can see. There are cushions. But we'll talk more about the details. I'm going to pass the clicker on to Fred, and he can talk to you about front.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Yes, everyone, this is the second edition of Front. Just to remind you, the first edition in 2018 was titled An American City, and it was curated by Michelle Grabner. And we thought that was an appropriate sort of opening gambit for Front to sort of use Cleveland as a canvas for artists to consider what it's like to live together in urban environments. The idea of Front always was that the artistic team would be different for every edition. Its theme would be different with every edition. Its graphic look would be different with every edition. And sure enough, it is different. This year, the show is curated by Prem Krishnamurthy, sort of a polymath, exhibition maker, writer, originally a graphic designer, based in Berlin. And because he's based in Berlin, we had the curious experience of, for the most of the 4-year planning cycle leading up to last week, we did it all on Zoom. He did finally get to the States this year, and he's here now, but yeah, it's been a bit of a bizarre thing. But he's done a brilliant job. The Oh Gods of Dust and Rainbows is, if anything, as Michael's project has, it's grown. We have 30 sites all over Northeast Ohio, 100 artists, and it lasts through October 2nd. So it's a bit of a project, but you relax, you've got plenty of time. You know, Front is an idea that's really based on massive collaboration, a lot like CAN. The sort of big idea here is that Cleveland has the right to do a project like this because we have these incredible institutions, both museum institutions, educational institutions, each with their own reputation, their style, recognition nationally and internationally, and you combine them all together, unite them under one theme and a single set of timing, and all of a sudden you have an international fear of missing out event. And that's really what Front is. If you sort of boil it down to one idea. The presenting partners are full curatorial partners. This is an idea that we intended in 2018. We, it was, I think we've more fully realized that in this edition, where each institution really is a very significant participation in their interpretation and presentation of the themes of Oh Gods of Dust and Rainbows. And then in addition to presenting partners who we really consider as full curatorial partners, we have additional sites we're calling exhibiting partners that, offered their spaces, their thinking, their participation in the show to just make it even bigger. And then the sort of ripple effects expand beyond that to organizations like CAN and the CAN Triennial, even Borderlight, the theater festival, which opened, I guess, last week. This is all about creating a real critical mass in our city of arts and culture, not just for the citizens of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, but also to attract people from all over the country and all over the world. And in fact, in the past week, we've had people literally from Hong Kong, Europe, all points across North America here to see what we have. And it's just like such a thrill to share our city. And it's so exciting to see it through the eyes of people who otherwise would not come here. And they are so impressed with what we have. It's incredibly gratifying. All this happens with a great deal of work. I don't have enough time to thank all the people on our staff, all the contractors, all the vendors, it's you know, all the staffs of our partners. It's literally thousands of people, but it's also a lot of money. This is it wouldn't happen without incredible generosity of individuals, foundations, corporations, just an incredibly generous community, not just in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, but nationwide. And that's incredibly, again, gratifying, encouraging. Some of you may know that the biennial triennial concept, although it is rare in the United States, is actually very common, for instance, in Europe. You know, sort of every city of a certain size has got one, maybe even two. But the difference between here and Europe is that those are primarily funded by national, state, and local governments who generously fund the arts. That does not happen in the United States, and not nearly as much as it should. I see Jeremy Johnson in the audience here, the director of the Assembly for the Arts. We're working to change that, but in the meantime, you know, we rely on the generosity of many, and it's so great to see that people have seen the value of this, not just as an artistic project, but as a civic project. The start of Front is Transformer Station. You can start anywhere really, but you know, the main ideas of the show are outlined in the show. You'll see a Transformer Station. So that's a good place to start. The theme is based on a poem by Langston Hughes, and the big ideas that sort of run through most of the exhibitions are really about this idea of art as a mode of healing, as a mode of therapy, as a way to recover from trauma, from difficulty, and find joy either on a personal level or on a societal level. It's a big and complicated show, but we do have help. There's a handy pocket guide that you can buy at Transformer Station. I think there are copies here for sale and other places. It's a helpful way to get started. There's also a free exhibition guide that you'll see in places all over town. Pick one up. It's a great way to get started. There's no wrong way to see Front. You won't love everything you see, and that's the fun of it. This is a journey of discovery, and I welcome you all to have that experience and everything else that Cleveland has to offer, particularly can. And it's interesting to see how the two projects sort of overlap, and I'm sure that's where Tizziana is going to go with her questions. So, thank you.
You never know. Thank you both for those presentations. And yeah, we can dive right into it. My first question, I think, is stemming from. So my first question, I think, is something that everyone in the room would probably have a unique answer to or response to. But my question is, can you both talk about the grand visions and ideas that motivated you to start both CAN and Front Triennial? Why art? And what is so important about presenting art in Cleveland today?
Well, that's a big question. I guess I'll get started with that. On a personal level, I'm a passionate believer that creativity should pervade all of our lives. Creativity doesn't just belong to artists, it belongs to all of us. And in fact, it's vital to our success. And so, you know, there's sort of a big idea behind something like Front. It's really about normalizing the creative process, bringing everyone in the city to the idea of creativity. and an appreciation of what creativity can do to improve our lives, to change society, to improve our world. You know, there's some, you know, side benefits of all of this. You know, something like Front brings dollars into our community. It improves the reputation of our city, which has got great beer, got great sports teams. All of that is fantastic, but we're also a cultural and intellectual hub, and we need to talk about that and be proud of it. And, you know, we also need to create a sustainable arts ecosystem here. It's tough being an artist. It's, you know, hard to make ends meet, and without a strong institutional system, a strong network of collectors, an audience that, you know, appreciates what artists do, it's hard to make a living here. And, you know, Front and CAN and all the many efforts that arts institutions like Spaces, the services they provide in the city, the Assembly for the Arts, is about making sure that creative professionals have a living that is valuable and productive here in our city, because that what they contribute to the city is essential for our growth, and we must support them. And events like this provide that platform.
Sure, I agree with all those things. I come to this from a journalistic perspective. As many of you know, my background is in writing, and for years before CAN was established, and for more years before CAN Triennial, I was a writer, including on public affairs. And I see art, you know, we talk about public discussion, and that is a reason that CAN Journal exists, so that there be a forum for discussion and letting people know what's going on in the art scene. But I would say that the art itself is public discussion. It's creative expression. It's things that people around you make to say something about their own place in the world, their perspective on the world, what they see happening in the world. It is the material itself by which neighbors communicate with each other in a big way, in a significant way. And writing about that, you know, amplifies that. Creating a triennial amplifies it and highlights it. And just to point out a specific thing, if you can run right from this panel discussion over to Clark Fulton by 3 o'clock, you can catch a performance by the Creative Destruction Collective called Snack. World premiere was last night. This is a dance performance. Snack is a reference to the gig economy, and it is a heartfelt expression of how it is to live in the gig economy and to struggle with 3 or 4 or 5 jobs and still feel like you're not quite getting there in terms of, you know, as Fred said, it's hard to make a living as an artist, gig economy. And so go see Snack if you can get over there. But that's just one example. You know, everything around you all summer long is public discussion.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think that contrary, I guess, to the sort of normalization of the creative process, I actually kind of think that it's an extraordinarily unusual process. And I think that there's something interesting about how, you know, we kind of tend to view the work of creatives as evident or visible in some way that needs to be like revealed. And so I don't really have a follow-up question for that one, but I was really thinking about sort of like the relationship that we have to creative processes versus creative outputs. But that will come later too. So what does it mean for a triennial like Front or CAN to mobilize these large and unprecedented energies from institutions, organizations, and individuals and artists? And for whom are these energies enacted?
Well, I think for CAN, as I started to say earlier, we've had this evolution in the way the triennial is presented. The first, we felt the urgency to find a way for Northeast Ohio artists to take advantage of the energy that Front was bringing. People saw that happening, and the question that I heard as director of CAN was, how can we be involved? How does this help us? What can we do? And so that's why we created the first triennial, and there was a sense of urgency, and 78th Street Studios was a great stroke of problem solving for us because it was readily available with a supremely supportive landlord and an existing community of people. This time we've evolved to be a little more of what CAN actually is, I would say. As I said earlier, CAN was founded by a collection of organizations talking about what they could do together, and they needed this public forum. Well, in partnering with 16 locations around town, all of which are organizations involved with the Collective Arts Network as contributors, we build the network. We leverage things that we're already doing, and that's something that I will talk more about as we go, I think. But it means recognizing what's here and getting really more than you would if you didn't do anything, I guess. It's amplifying, it's synergistic, it's making more than you had.
I think your question, about like who's Front for, and is a complicated one, and I'm not sure that there's a simple answer because the Front has so many audiences. I hope that wasn't me. There's an international art audience, which is small but significant to the project because that's sort of like these are the tastemakers, the sort of arbiters of what's important in the art world, whether they're right or wrong. That sort of audience exists. It's an important one to Front. Because that sort of imprimatur, is what attracts audience. Then there are the professionals in the creative world, the curators, the exhibition makers, the whole museum infrastructure. We have these very significant museums here in Northeast Ohio that are often very frustrated by the fact that although they do remarkable exhibitions and may have incredible collections that are truly world class, they don't get a world audience without something like this. And without a world audience, you don't attract the best employees. You're not able to raise the kind of dollars to make acquisitions or put on shows that you would like to put on. So that's an important audience for us. Artists, of course, nationally, regionally, locally. This is all about celebrating the work of artists, not just giving them exposure, paying them. Helping them build careers. And then, of course, there's the public. We want this to be a nice place, a place where we can gather, share ideas, feel proud of our city, and enjoy our city. So I could probably name about 4 or 5 other sort of audience segments. You know, it's ultimately kind of everyone, but you know, front does look different to each one of those audience segments, and we have to perform different functions for each one.
Yeah, and I think that that's actually what's so interesting about this sort of almost like bifurcated triennial model that you're both proposing civically. But along those lines, in what ways do these projects of both can triennial and front triennial intersect? And what do you believe are your roles in each other's triennials, as well as your roles in the larger Cleveland arts ecosystem?
Well, can wouldn't exist without front. Certainly.
And I would say that front is so happy that can exists. So I'm going to make a confession here, but I think it's obvious, so it's not a big secret. You know, can is incredibly helpful to front because it gives us a really big platform for the local artistic community. Now, front, I'm very proud of front's offering of local artists. And I mean, we really stepped up our game this year, and you know, I think we've done a job that I'm very proud of. But you know, can frankly takes a lot of heat off of me.
There's this funny illustration of that. So during the first triennial, I used to say we were going to raise the pirate flag. Because we were, you know, doing our own, you know, what, I don't know what, defiant revolution. Who knows what can is not revolutionary in that sense, but we were doing our own thing on behalf of the people the artists who live here. But the amusing thing to me is that what's evolved is local artists creating their own spin-off events from CAN. So there are several that are showing, you know, artists who were not a part of CAN or venues that are not a part of the triennial as exhibit partners. There's a show, the headline of which is Where Are We? You know, the CAN theme being You Are Here, the geographic present tense focus. There's another show, Where Are We? There's one that says, if you're cool, you are here. During the first triennial, there was the Can't triennial. Closer, yeah. And that one didn't survive the pandemic, but another one, there was the We Can triennial, the first round, and that did survive the pandemic and is now the We Can Too triennial. You know, and so you don't get that, do you?
Thank you, Michael.
You know.
There's something else, though, I would add more seriously is that, you know, this is an opportunity. What I love about this is like an incredible summer of arts and culture, right? You know, we have so much happening. And it's like super exciting. I mean, I think that, you know, just what CAN is doing, what Borderlight is doing, Front, it's like, wow, you know, what can the community do when it sort of coordinates things? And I think it just raises the bar everywhere. And that is, I think, a great thing for our city, and it's a joy to see.
You know, I want to follow up, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but specific to how we serve and the role we play in the community. So one of the things that CAN has tried to do is amplify people's careers. And as I said, take advantage or ride the coattails or whatever of the international attention that Front is drawing. Well, one of the more regionally focused ways that we've done that is with a series of exhibition prizes. And this is on my mind right now because the venues participating with us have a deadline, which is like now, to tell us their answers. What all that means, we've partnered with 9 this year, regional museums and other institutions who are sending their curators to the Triennial to choose artists who will get a solo show in those museums and other venues in the next 3 years. We did this in the first Triennial. It's grown this time. The Akron Art Museum has sent its curator, Jeffrey Katzen, to Cleveland to look around and choose an artist. The Butler Institute in Youngstown is choosing a solo show from Triennial. The Erie, Pennsylvania Art Museum, Mansfield Art Center, Massillon Museum, Canton Museum, Art Neo, Bay Arts, and Summit Art Space. I think I got them all. But you know, advancing artists' careers by giving them exhibitions in museums, including museums outside of outside of Cuyahoga County in the immediate region, is something I'm really proud of. And it's one of those something from nothing things where we have the conversation and say, yes, let's do this together. And off we go.
Yeah, that's great. Here's my premonition, my next question, which I think maybe gets into your response a little bit more, Michael. I was thinking a lot and reading a lot about the biennial, triennial models, and their function as a spectacle, which is like a just critique, I think. And art critic Peter Skeldal talks about the festival as inequality as their appeal to some generic public versus the specific appeal of an art fair as a market, favoring installations over commercial work, allowing for artists to work and exhibit in hybridized ways. How do your respective triennials support or address the multifaceted ways of artistic labor and production? And how are you recentering artists in your work?
Well, I can get that one started. Really, this is obviously a project that revolves entirely around artists and artists' work, and is very much features commissions, though not every exhibition is new work. Many exhibitions do include new work. So we've done several things. For one thing, we are the first and only biennial, triennial in the US, and I think only the second institution in Ohio to be a wage signatory. So WAGE is an organization in New York that's developed a minimum wage model for paying artists. I think that's just incredibly important to establish the fact that artists need to be paid. They need to be paid fairly and well. And so, it's actually been a wonderful experience. It's greatly simplified our lives in some way, because okay, the same standard applies to every artist, whether they're local or international, and I think that's great. We've also, really thought carefully about, okay, what role does an organization like Front take in the arts ecosystem, especially locally? And that was the birth of the idea of the Front Art Futures Fellowship, which is a really ambitious fellowship program with goes beyond exhibiting artists. So, I think there's a lot of focus on, well, the best thing you can do for an artist is give them an exhibition. Well, that's not really totally true. Artists need to build careers, and exposure is like only one element of that. The Art Futures Fellowship is built around a $25,000 stipend that each awardee receives, no strings attached. There is no obligation to do work there. it is for the artist to decide how to use those resources. And that it includes professional support from front staff. It includes paid travel, both locally and internationally, with front staff to gain exposure and experience and contacts in the broader art world. It includes membership in our artistic team. So the front fellows will actually participate in the building of our 2025 show. And then finally, it includes an invitation to actually be a participant in the show. And that participation will be paid for over and above the fellowship participation. And the goal here is to, I'm going to be very blunt here. We want to make artists famous. We want to build sustainable careers, and we know that means that can't be done entirely in Cleveland. And this is the value that Front brings because of our connection to the international art world, artists and professionals. We can provide local artists with sort of experience and visibility that they could not get otherwise. I'm extremely proud of and excited by that program, which I think over time could have a transformational effect in Cleveland. And I should point out, this is a fellowship that's focused on BIPOC artists. This is we're a majority Black city, and we need to reflect that in our community. And this is I think a powerful tool to sort of change the balance of power, frankly, in the local art world. And I think could be extremely positive.
I think the question of balancing commercial concerns for artists against all the other concerns that artists have and all the ways that art is evolving is a really interesting one for Ken. Cleveland is rightly described as a manufacturing town. We have the term, really embraced the term in Cleveland, makers. The artists in Cleveland, a lot of them make things. Broadly in the commercial art sector, the way artists get paid is if they sell a thing that they made. And so the first Triennial was almost entirely built on that idea. Most of the 90-some artists who participated were not paid unless they sold work. They sold art, they made some money. And that's how it is at galleries all over the city. If you present a show, you spend money to do it, you make some money if you sell an object. The second Triennial, we're not paying artists enough. I would love to pay them 10 or 20 times what we're paying, but all the artists are being paid, to participate. I think the other way that that's an interesting conversation is that with the things that they make, especially this Triennial, I would say more so than last time, the artists are embracing conceptual ideas. There's an artist, Ron Shelton, who's exhibiting at Praxis. If you know Ron, you know that he's had a couple of different pursuits. An earlier one was from an environmental perspective to kind of leave no trace. He was making ephemeral works. He would make sculpture out of ice, which would be there until it melted. He was and using organic materials, using chalk. He had a great slate board in his apartment, and he was making images in chalk and erasing them. And but he'd take a picture. If you're painting on canvas, then you have the canvas, and then you can reuse it. store or sell it, but you have this canvas. And the ephemerality of that was a big pursuit for him, and he's moved on to plastic, post-consumer, post-use plastic. There's an enormous amount of it produced by the medical industry, for example, and that's the material that he's using at this installation over at Praxis up in Waterloo. You know, the multitude of plastic used in hospitals can't be used again because of sterility concerns. And so out the door it goes. Well, if you're an artist, you can make something with that, which Ron has. And so everything that he makes is sort of freighted with those ideas. And there are, you know, multiple artists throughout the exhibit whose work is really about the idea more than the object.
Yeah, and along those lines, I was thinking a lot about how difficult it can be to come away from biennials and triennials without feeling the sense of an extractive core. Of course, we can be incredibly happy and relieved with the works on view, but mental, material, ecological, and physical exhaustion for precarious art ecosystems, for precarious landscapes, and for art laborers, as many of the folks in our audience are today, is always on the mind. So how are you both working to replete these resources and sustainably reinvigorate the model for Cleveland?
You go. Wow. Thank you.
It's a really good question. I think I'm not sure I want to be on the mic yet. I might need like 20 minutes to think about that. Can you ask the question again?
And I say this as someone who goes to a lot of biennials and triennials and has been involved in the production of them, not insignificant amount. I know that they can be incredibly extractive in the way that they participate in art ecosystems that are often fragile. And so thinking about how happy and relieved we are with the works on view, we still need to account for the mental and physical exhaustion for precarious arts ecosystems, precarious environmental systems, and arts laborers. And how are you both working to repeat these resources and sustainably reinvigorate the model for Cleveland?
Right. So this morning I got to sleep in. I know a lot of the revenue that CAN has, about half of the revenue is going directly into artists and arts worker pockets, paying individual artists, paying curatorial fees, paying installers, supporting the venues that are partners in presenting. So we're turning over money within the economy that comes from the economy. Our funders are local, and we're giving their money to local artists and local organizations overwhelmingly, entirely, I guess. I certainly appreciate the overworked arts worker. And how to restore that I mean, that's bigger than any of us. The degree to which people who do things because they're motivated by passion to do so causes them to overextend themselves over and over and over. They do so willfully. They wouldn't not do so. And it wears them down. I can observe that. I don't know ultimately what that answer is.
Yeah, it's a great question. Our opening was last week, and Monday of this week, we had our sort of first team Zoom call, and I'll be honest with you, there was a lot of tears, of joy, but also exhaustion, and I mean, this is and we all knew it was coming, you don't work for 3 years for a big reveal and expect that it's not going to be stressful. It's incredibly stressful. That's I mean, I think somewhat baked into the model. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I come from the entrepreneurial world where these like giant, projects are par for the course. But it's and to some degree I've sort of transferred that over to the art world. But it is hard on people, it really is. And all I think we can do probably is, one, pay people fairly, treat people well, and try and manage these projects in ways that where we don't lose the joy. I always tell my team, you've got to feel like you're having fun, and if you're not having fun most of the time, you're doing it wrong. And honestly, if it's not fun most of the time, I don't want to be involved. So, so you can never lose sight of the fact that there does need to be joy. But I think there's another thing that you're alluding to, and the other is more about the wider ecology, not the human ecology, but the environment. Producing all of these things for 3 months and then throwing many of them away, doesn't feel great. And we need to do better about that. We have a few projects that are going to create a bit of an issue for us at the end of the show. What do we do with this stuff? And I think that's something that sort of Front as an institution is going to try and take on in our next run. Like, how are we a better, more sustainable sort of steward of our projects, and how do we find either longer lives for the projects or ways to recycle them, reuse them, repurpose them so they are not ending up in a landfill.
This is a small thing, but it was a fun thing, and it speaks directly to that. So in the promotion, even not only the work itself and the things that we're showing, but in the promotion of it, there's a substantial amount of plastic, around the city. Like we bought 18 sandwich boards and the Coroplast signs that go inside them, and we bought 12-foot banners for multiple locations. If you've ever bought banners for outdoor display, that's 18-ounce vinyl, that's some plastic. And so we had this idea the first triennial, and we're going to do it again. We restitched those into totes or grocery bags. Hired a local what's the word? Someone who sews. Seems a dude. A seam person, a tailor. We hired Fuzzy Stitchworks, Brian Clever, to and to do a great job. So put belting underneath, they're super sturdy. You could carry a body in one of those bags, and they endure. So we recycled some plastic.
So within the context of Front, I've heard the word movement used to describe the framework of the programs. What does this mean to the way that the organization and Triennial operate internally?
Um, you know, it's, I don't think I really have a great answer for that, honestly. One of the challenges for Front and, and it's very much on my mind because now that we've launched our second edition, I can't claim that it's an experiment anymore. It's not a startup, we have to be, put our grown-up pants on and, really think about what are we as a long-term institution. And I think we will likely do some sort of a strategic plan to really figure that out. I mean, this is honestly an organization that's a bit too dependent on one person. And it has some built-in challenges, like how do you do something as big as what we have right now, only once every 3 years? So that means, in October 3rd, we go down to like basically having like 2 employees from like probably, and effectively we have hundreds currently. That is, or from an organizational management standpoint, incredibly challenging. So I don't have the answer to that. How we become truly a movement, means I think we've got to become a broader based organization. That I think will be one of the challenges of a strategic plan in the coming year to, answer that question.
Thank you. And then I have my last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. So if you guys want to start mulling your own personal thoughts. And this one's for you, Michael. Campaign You Are Here purports to, quote, at times skewer notions of culture and politics. How is this evident in the works of exhibition among you?
That's a good question. I think that culture and politics and social concerns are really prominent in artistic creation. Sometimes overtly, and sometimes in some implicit way. I think that the work that I described from Ron Shelton is relates to that because he's using plastic produced by the medical industry, which of course is one of the region's biggest employers and most important commercially and for the health of the community, the most important things, but it has this byproduct. The dance performance that I described earlier is right on point. It's about being overworked. I think that was one of the reasons that it was so powerful, because sitting in the Inlet Dance Theater's studio with, I don't know, 75 people that watched the world premiere, I think a lot of the people in that room knew exactly, had lived the life that was being portrayed in dance in front of them. Without talking more maybe about specific works, I mean, it's fascinating to see how people, like the word skewer is not one that I use, but one of our curators introduced that to the conversation. And you all know probably the artist Dana DePue. Dana, I encourage you to take advantage of this, has created, so he plays in this cultural skewering kind of way. In the first Triennial, he created a neon sign installation that said "Your art sucks," and it's still in place above the main entrance to 78th Street Studios. So you walk into that regional arts hive and you simply can't miss that message. And some people took that seriously, which was really fascinating. So in 2022. There's a couple of things that Dana has installed. One is a selfie station with another neon sign. And the selfie station has an empty chair underneath it, so you can sit there. It's to invite you to sit down and sit there. And there's an arrow pointing down to the empty chair, so you know exactly who we're talking about. And then up above that, this fast neon sign says "World's Greatest Artist." And a part of this is a series of works called I think it's I might not be hitting the title exactly, but the message is the Dictionary of Northeast Ohio Art Abridged. And these are framed pages from a dictionary that are torn out, and the pages happen to be the words, or the pages that have words like selfless and humble and similar words. And in each case, that word and definition has been carefully cut out with an X-Acto knife. So the way that this dictionary was abridged was to remove the words that referred to humility and selflessness and similar things. And then that's just a Cleveland artist creating the abridged dictionary of Northeast Ohio art by that specific way is just poking the egos of all of us who live here. There are great examples of that.
Great, thank you guys. So, I don't know, Megan, how are we doing this?
Oh, we are, so essentially what we're going to do is, first off, big round of applause, everyone. Now for the burning questions. Does anybody have any questions for Fred or Michael? Perfect, right up front. Front.
So you now have had a whole week to rest on your laurels. So I was wondering now, what do you see for the future of your organizations and the future of our exhibition?
Well, as I said earlier, this is going to be a time for reflection. And we are going to sort of think about, well, what's our next move? You know, so it's, I mean, you know, being like perfectly blunt, and you know, an option would be not to do this again. I don't think that is an option we're going to seriously consider, but I think it's important for us to sort of take a zero-based look at the whole thing and say, what is this? Who is it for? How is it working? And you know, what's the true value of this effort? So I don't know the answer to that. I think there will be a future, but what that future looks like, I don't know. But I'm excited about it because that's always been the nature of this project is to be open to the possibilities. So looking forward to that.
So Michael, did you want to answer the same or?
You know, similarly, I think it's impossible to do something like this, and while you're in the midst of it, not try to think, how could this be done better? How could it be made more relevant? How could it be made more manageable to the point about the arts worker? How could it be made more sustainable in that specific way? You know, before you're finished with the one, you begin to think about those questions with the next. You know, and separately, can the primary thing that we do is publish this magazine and website, and we were in the implementation stage of a recently finalized strategic plan, and so we've got a lot of evolving on other fronts as well.
Thank you. I got a question over here.
This is a question for Fred. One of the things that I appreciated in your sharing was naming that Cleveland is a majority Black city. So part of the leadership up front around the Arts Futures, right, is to make a connection between one's art practice and the environment that we find ourselves in. But I noticed no one in the room clapped. So I'm curious, Fred, what meaning do you make from that silence?
Thank you for that question, Carmen. Maybe that, I'm just a poor presenter. I think this is a big deal. And yes, you're right. It deserves a round of applause. Not for me. Not for me, for the four artists who won this, award. Hi, guys.
I think a question that I have is speaking from, not only an artist, but a Black artist in Cleveland, is that a lot of BIPOC artists feel like they can't come into these spaces or exhibit within these spaces. Or even like programs such as this, they don't feel like they should be here. What are the steps that you guys and your institutions are taking to make sure that we kind of make this less of a reality? Are there certain programs you're working on, such as like getting more, people of color to take part in these discussions, panel sessions, things like that, to make sure that we are represented not only in the audience, but also up there with you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an ongoing challenge. I mean, I think the Art Futures Fellowship is one way that we're addressing that. I mean, certainly the sort of demographics of the artists who are participating in our show is a way to address that. But, I think some of it is, it's far more basic because this is a systemic problem, right? It's not, I mean, there's sort of like certain box checking things you can do that look good, but, it doesn't really fundamentally change things. And I'll give you one small example that relates to Transformer Station. Transformer Station is in a neighborhood that's rapidly gentrifying, but it's like right next to Lakeview Terrace, which is public housing, which is almost entirely Black population. And one of the things we sort of realized is the people who live there, one, didn't even know Transformer Station exists, and two, totally don't, if they did, totally don't think it's for them. So one of the sort of upgrades we've done to Transformer Station, and that was really just completed last week, is this is a simple thing, but adding seating and shade in front of the building, partially to announce that, okay, this is a public place, but also just to provide an amenity. It's like, in so many urban neighborhoods, there's just no place to sit. There's no shade. There's not enough green space. We need to make our whole city more welcoming. So it's more than just institutions, and I mean, sort of the obvious things, it's all the details. And that's just one small thing, but hopefully it'll make a difference.
I guess I want to also follow that. And this is more about CAN itself than the Triennial, but it plays out there as well. So CAN was born of institutions in the Cleveland art scene 11 years ago. And about 5 or 6 years ago, and there are a lot of them at that point, looking down a list in the back of the magazine, there were probably 90 organizations or something like that. At that time, looking down that list, every single one of those organizations was owned or operated by white people. I said, the door is open. I said, in a what crass way, like we want everybody's money, because the way CAN was created was by stakeholders who each pitch in some money to help make the whole project possible, right? So more is in this economic way better. Also just in terms of numbers, more is more, so we want everybody involved, so the door is open, so everybody should come through. And we've been at this for 5 years or something like that, and every organization, I mean, everyone, was owned or operated by white people. And so, we started to try to figure out, you know, how do you can't just be proactive and go out to people, inviting them in and saying, you know, by the way, it's going to cost you, you know, $100 annual fee. And when you publish a story, it's going to cost you a couple $100 because it costs us several hundred, you know. It's a great deal, but it's a threshold. And so we've made a bit of progress. There's a ton more progress to be made, but by creating a program that simply waives those fees for organizations owned or operated by people of color, and for the last several years have gone from, among participating galleries, gone from 0 to about 20% or 18% or so of galleries owned or operated by people of color, including Deep Roots Experience, as you would know, frame gallery and Spaces has jumped on, and Kings and Queens of Arts, you know, and several others, but not to get through the list. But still, like to Fred's point, I'm sorry, moCa, absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm leaving some out just to. There's a lot. So to Fred's point, it's a majority Black city. 18% is not majority. To Fred's other point, it's a big, basic, you know, deep-rooted challenge. In order for CAN in that specific way to reflect the city, there would need to be a majority of arts organizations owned or operated by people of color. Which, you know, that's what the city looks like. Isn't that how it should be? You know, certainly this is a much larger conversation than sitting here at the mic, but I'm, you know, at least happy to say that there's been some progress, and I think that extends too into the triennial itself. Each time we've made sure that we have a diverse curatorial team, you know, representing men, women, people of color in equal measures, and this time youth. You know, their high school students are one of the curatorial teams this time. So we're making progress.
Here.
Hey, Tizziana, Fred, and Michael, good to see you. The conversation around, you know, being an artist, how it's hard, how, you know, we need to pay our artists, I'm sure resonates with everyone here in the audience. And something that inspired me when, you know, that conversation was taking place is that artists and athletes, we view them as very different. But that conversation just reminded me that the two are actually very similar in that if an athlete doesn't know how to train properly, if an athlete doesn't know how to nourish themselves properly, get enough rest, develop a regimen, that athlete can't perform, that athlete can't win investment, be featured, and grow in their athletic career. I think that's very similar for artists. So my question, and Tizziana, please jump in too, because, you know, you do a lot through Spaces. Spaces is great. I would love to hear, you know, what does that nourishment look like, you know, for artists in your perspectives, and how are you teaching artists to nourish themselves so they can avoid things like burnout, they can avoid things like exhaustion or struggling to pay bills?
I can jump in first.
I think my number one answer is rest. Every single artist I've talked to is so completely exhausted. And I think rest is incredibly important. Time to just sit and think with your thoughts. Like artists are such brilliant thinkers and they're brilliant imaginers. And, you just need space where you're not in production mode or de-installation mode or, moving on to the next thing or trying to figure out how to, articulate your ideas, just sit with them and rest. And so I would say that that's one of the most important things that can be centered right now for artistic practice.
That's very interesting. I agree with that. And I sort of build on that a little bit. I think in Cleveland, Michael, you said it, we have an industrial heritage, a lot of artistic practice in Cleveland's traditionally been about making stuff, craft, and that's a rich and wonderful heritage. But, art making, creativity is about thinking, and sometimes I think that in the local artistic community, I guess even the world artistic community, artists sometimes mistake the act of making, the labor of making the craft, perfection of their craft is the essence of what they're doing. It's about ideas. And you need space, you need time, you need rest to develop ideas. But it's worth making that investment. And, and Front, if anything, is about the celebration of that aspect of art making, the ideas behind the art. And I think more focus on that can, yes, give artists the sort of space that they need, the healthy space that they need to avoid burnout, but also the opportunity to do bigger, better things.
I think I got time for one more question.
Thank you all three. Let me go back to the beginning, the land acknowledgement, and ask you about the future in that context. The interface between art and health and public health, where Cleveland is going to be when the world is facing these huge problems, which I can label that include a sixth extinction that we could be part of. Art has always been a part of our cultural response to needing to change the culture in very profound ways, ideas, as you just said. So can you imagine in your strategic planning and your work, thinking about Cleveland as a model for how we can, as people who live in cities and in nature, adapt our culture, our ideas to actually flourish rather than risk extinction?
Well, I couldn't agree more that artists lead the way. And art can be an incredible catalyst for change and changing minds. I think art tends to be dismissed a bit as, well, that's a nice to have. Actually, I think it's an essential. I think many of the artists up front, and can for that matter, in big and small ways, are trying to address the issues that you're talking about. We need to get the rest of the world to see that, listen to those conversations, think about those ideas, and bring them to life in the world through change. Because yes, these are significant issues, and I think the artistic community should be at the center of them.